Learning there were at least 12 people on that flight with ties to British Columbia. 2 of them were family doctors in Iran. Their daughter, a 19-year-old living in North Vancouver, was in touch with her mother just hours before the flight took off. Here's some of what she told our colleagues.
So at 12 a.m. I messaged her asking, like, hey, how are you doing? And she says, well, we're at the airport, but they're not letting us check in because it's too early. So then we just laughed a bit. We talked about, okay, what she would do on the flight, what she would do after, and then that was last.
Sounds like you guys were really close.
We were.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they're very proud of you.
Yes, she was.
The CBC's Tanya Fletcher is in Vancouver. She joins me now. Tanya, what more are we hearing from those who knew the victims from BC?
Well, absolute heartbreak, Carol, and we're here in North Vancouver tonight. There is a very large Persian community, specifically in North Vancouver, and behind me is Amir Bakery, and this was a small business, and its owners were involved in that fateful flight. It's owned by a mother and father and a teenage daughter, and we know now that the mother and the daughter were on that flight and perished. Their names were Aish Pourgaderi and Fatima Pesavand, and they were on that flight. They owned and ran this bakery for 4 or 5 years. We spoke with a business owner who runs a photography studio next door, and he says the family opened up this bakery 4 years ago. The mother and father both worked here. He describes them as very hardworking, and they were about to take their Canadian citizenship exam. He describes the mother as quiet, hardworking. She came to Canada for a better life. They were permanent residents, not yet Canadian citizens. And he says she didn't have a computer, so every few weeks she would pop into his studio next door to use the internet. And the father was actually here last night printing some documentation. He's since left. You can see the bakery is closed. That's because he is now trying to get to Iran, we're told. Others we're hearing from is a popular international university student. Her name is Delarem Dadashinajad, and she was studying nutrition at Langara College, and she'd been flying, was about to return back to Vancouver after visiting family in Tehran. And we spoke with today her best friend who lives here in North Vancouver, and you know, she describes her as funny and caring and energetic. They went out the night before that Delarem had traveled to Iran, and she and her husband were very good friends. The 3 of them were very close, and she says her husband actually spoke with Delarem in Iran on FaceTime just yesterday. It turns out Delarem had been wanting to purchase her best friend some jewelry from Iran as a gift, a souvenir to bring home, and she tells us how her husband may have been one of the very last to speak with Delarem.
She was asking him what kind of bracelet I like, what color. She was at the store, actually. She was FaceTiming him, showing him different styles and whatnot. And they talked, and yeah, I think she was one of the last people that he talked to.
And they were actually supposed to pick up Delarem from the airport upon her scheduled arrival today. We also know that a family of 3 was killed in that plane crash. Their names are Ardalan Hamadi, his wife Nilufar Rizagari, and their teenage son Kamyar Hamadi. The 3 of them had just taken a vacation, a 2-week holiday. They had been debating whether or not to go. In the end, they did. And we heard from a family friend today who's known them for several years. He describes them attending Halloween parties together. The young teenage son was always very energetic, very curious, very outgoing. He describes the wife as friendly, humble, and caring. She just graduated and was looking forward to attending her first job at a nearby school to be a teacher. And he describes just how much they'll be missed.
Everybody's in shock. Everybody's in shock, and everybody just don't want to believe it. The fact is, it's a sad news. What keeps me going is his happiness. Like when I think of them as that family, they smile, and you know that smile is always on their faces, and that's what I want to cherish for the rest of my life as a memory.
As we mentioned, so many Persians here in the community of North Vancouver. We know that half of the dozen who are from BC are from North Vancouver here specifically. And another one is a couple in their 30s, a young, very successful couple, Daniel Saket and Faye Kazarani. He worked as a lead structural engineer at a real estate company here in North Vancouver, and she worked as a hygienist. And we heard from a friend today who describes just what they're like and how much, again, they will be missed.
Both very kind, no ill intentions, so kind, and always smiling. My wife was just saying earlier how even if no one was around, Daniel was always smiling.
And Carol, we are hearing another somewhat chilling storyline come out of North Vancouver from a local travel agent. It turns out that he had booked 6 of the passengers who were on that fateful flight, 2 from here in BC, 2 from Winnipeg, and 2 from Calgary. And he says right now, we spoke to him earlier in the day, he was very busy because a lot of customers were there trying to rebook those passengers who are still in Iran, because a lot of the flights on that specific airline have since been canceled, leaving Tehran. And he said today, he described it saying, because we have the contact with the passengers, he says, I couldn't sleep last night, my colleagues as well, because we knew these people personally. He describes them as family too. He says the customers are all our family. It's really sad. He just couldn't believe that 6 of those passengers that he'd booked on that flight had perished. So much tragedy coming from all across the country here, Carol.
All right, Tanya, thank you so much. Tanya Fletcher in North Vancouver.